My sister left her kids for me to raise and disappeared for 6 years. Now she's back begging for forgiveness, but my firm reply left her terrified.
So, I, a 26-year-old female, have an older sister, 30-year-old female, who I haven't been in touch with for the past 6 years.
We didn't have a fallout or fight, we weren't in touch because she just disappeared one day 6 years ago. My sister dumped her twin toddlers at my place and told me that she'd be back at the end of the day after running some errands. Her kids were 1 and 1/2 years old at the time, and I agreed to watch over them for a while because it wasn't uncommon for my sister to ask me to babysit her kids if I was at home and she had work to do, or if our aunt was unavailable. Our parents had passed away when we were both young, like when we were 10 or something, and we'd been brought up by our maternal aunt, 46-year-old female. My guess is that on the day she brought the kids to my place, my aunt was sick, otherwise, she would have taken them to her. Knowing what I know now, I was in my final year of college and was living in an apartment with a couple of my friends back then, but none of them were home on that day and were out celebrating since we were supposed to graduate in just a few weeks. I looked after the kids for a few hours but began to worry after 9 o'clock because my sister had never been that late. I tried to call her several times, but the calls wouldn't go through, and she wasn't responding to my text messages. So, I waited for a few minutes more but then decided to call my aunt for help, and she tried to call my sister as well, but even her calls weren't going through. I checked her social media, and all of them had been deactivated, so there was just no way to reach out to her. My friends came back at around 11 o'clock in the night, and even they tried to call her from their phones, but with no luck. In the end, I was forced to accept that maybe my sister had no plans of coming back. That day turned into a week, then a month, a year, and eventually 6 whole years. My aunt and I had filed a missing persons report 24 hours after she disappeared because we just didn't want to admit to ourselves that my sister had pulled this off on purpose and intended not to come back. It sucked, but a few months later, I did come to terms with it. My sister and I weren't particularly close growing up since she was different from me, but I still loved her like family does. She turned into a bit of a party animal in high school and decided not to attend college. Instead, she moved in with her high school boyfriend in a small apartment at 19 and got a job instead, which is okay. But they'd waste a lot of their income unnecessarily and had no sense of responsibility. Most of it would go into drinks at clubs, clothes and makeup, and her boyfriend's sneaker collection. So, she'd ask my aunt for rent money much too often for her liking. That increased when she got knocked up and had to go to the doctors frequently. My aunt, bless her heart, was able to support us financially because her business thrived, and she had no spouse or children of her own to tie her down. My sister and I were her entire world, her only family, so she gave without a whisper of complaint. Yet, I could sense her quiet disapproval of my sister's reckless lifestyle. Every time my sister showed up, hand outstretched for money to cover rent or other expenses, my aunt's face would cloud with disappointment. It wasn't just the requests, it was the way my sister seemed to drift through life without a care for responsibility. Witnessing this, I resolved to work harder, to prove myself worthy of my aunt's sacrifices and to never be the source of her silent frustration. But then, my sister vanished, along with her boyfriend. None of their friends had any clue where they'd gone, leaving us to grapple with the painful realization that they might be gone for good, perhaps forever. For 6 long years, I lived with the uncertainty of whether my sister was even alive. In that time, I carved out a career as an investment banker and moved back into our childhood home, which my aunt and I had recently reclaimed through hard work and determination. Together, we rebuilt our lives in that familiar space, finding solace in its walls as we resigned ourselves to the likelihood that my sister was gone for good. That is, until last week, when she reappeared out of nowhere, catching us completely off guard. She'd been back in town for 3 weeks, quietly tracking us down through old friends, and finally found us. Her sudden presence felt like a jolt, stirring up a storm of emotions we'd long buried. At first, she seemed overjoyed to see us, her smile bright but hollow. My aunt and I, however, were far from elated. 6 years of silence, without so much as a phone call or a note, and now she expected to waltz back into our lives as if nothing had changed? We did our best to remain courteous, keeping the conversation civil, but the air was thick with tension. Neither of us asked where she'd been, partly because it felt futile, and partly because she offered no explanation of her own accord. After some awkward small talk, she finally broached the subject of her children, expressing an eager desire to reunite with them, to let them see their mother again. Her words landed like a weight, heavy with unspoken assumptions. The truth was, her children weren't with us anymore. My aunt and I had cared for them for nearly a month after she disappeared, but the burden was overwhelming. I was still a college student, juggling exams and dreams of a future, while my aunt was a busy professional, her days consumed by the demands of her business. When she'd taken us in as kids, my sister and I were past the age of needing constant supervision, so she could balance work and parenting. But my nephews, barely toddlers, required round-the-clock care, diapers, feedings, sleepless nights. It was more than I could handle with my studies, and my aunt, growing older, couldn't manage both her career and the relentless needs of 2 young children. After much heartache, we made the gut-wrenching decision to place them for adoption. The process wasn't easy. We navigated a maze of legalities, ensuring the twins would find a loving home. Ultimately, they were welcomed by a kind couple, Adam and Mara, names changed, who had struggled to have children of their own. They embraced the twins with open hearts, and we stayed in touch, visiting occasionally to see the kids thrive in their new environment. It was a bittersweet relief, knowing they were safe and loved, but the decision still weighed heavily on us. When my sister asked about them, I couldn't bring myself to share the full story, not out of malice, but to protect the twins and their new family from the chaos her return might bring. Instead, I told her the bare truth: we'd had to give them up for adoption after she left. The weight of that moment hung between us, a silent acknowledgement that her absence had reshaped all our lives in ways she couldn't yet comprehend. Since the children had been legally considered abandoned due to my sister's sudden departure without any provisions for their care, they were eligible for adoption under the circumstances. Navigating the bureaucratic hurdles and emotional turmoil that followed was no small feat. It involved countless meetings with social workers, legal consultations, and tearful deliberations between my aunt and me. Eventually, after what felt like an eternity of paperwork and waiting, we successfully placed them in a new home. The adoptive parents turned out to be a wonderful couple, Adam and Mara, whose names I've altered for privacy, who had been desperately trying to start a family of their own after years of fertility struggles that left them heartbroken and hopeful in equal measure. From the moment they met the twins, it was clear they were meant to be together. The way Adam's eyes lit up when he held them, or how Mara gently sang lullabies to soothe their cries, it was a match made in the stars, or so it seemed to us observers. We've maintained a close connection with Adam and Mara ever since, checking in regularly through calls and emails, and making it a point to visit the children whenever possible. It's heartwarming to witness how the boys have blossomed under their care, thriving in school, surrounded by love, and free from the instability that once loomed over their early lives. These visits are bittersweet for me, a reminder of the bond we shared during those initial chaotic weeks, but also a testament to the positive path we've all chosen for them. However, when my sister inquired about her children during her unexpected visit, I couldn't bring myself to divulge these intimate details. Deep down, I knew that revealing the full story, their happy new family, the ongoing relationship we cherished, would only ignite a firestorm of resentment and potential interference. No mother, no matter how flawed, would receive such news lightly. It could shatter her fragile illusions and prompt her to disrupt the stability the twins now enjoyed. The last thing I wanted was for her to harass Adam, Mara, or worst of all, the innocent children themselves, dragging them into a web of confusion and conflict. So, with a heavy heart, I opted for a measured disclosure. I simply informed her that, in the wake of her abandonment, we had no choice but to arrange for their adoption, sparing the specifics that painted a picture of their flourishing new life. The moment those words left my lips, my sister's face twisted in disbelief. She shook her head vehemently, accusing me of playing a cruel joke, insisting that I must be pulling her leg in some twisted attempt at humor. But my aunt and I stood there stoically, our expressions unchanging. Not a hint of amusement crossed our faces, for there was absolutely nothing comical about the gravity of this revelation. The room grew thick with tension as the seconds ticked by, and slowly, painfully, the reality dawned on her. Her denial crumbled like a house of cards, replaced by a wave of raw, unfiltered horror. In an instant, she erupted into a frenzy of anguish, her composure shattering completely. She unleashed a torrent of screams directed at us, hurling insults that cut deep, calling us heartless beasts, monstrous betrayers, and every vile name under the sun that her grief could conjure. The accusations flew like daggers, each one laced with betrayal and fury. Then, as abruptly as the rage had surged, it morphed into wrenching sobs that racked her entire body, leaving her collapsed and trembling on the floor, a picture of utter devastation that no one could have anticipated from her usually guarded demeanor. My aunt and I let her throw a tantrum, but after she seemed to calm down a bit, I asked her to leave since we had nothing to talk about anymore. She did leave, but she was still crying, and it was really disturbing to see her that way because she wasn't a very emotional or expressive person. So, for her to completely break down in front of us was a pretty big deal. My aunt and I didn't know how to react to this and decided that we just weren't going to talk about it at all. It was draining enough that my sister had shown up after so long and had expected things to have remained the same after 6 long years, and then screamed at us for doing what anyone else in their sane minds would have done. Neither of us wanted to discuss it even more and just make it worse for us, so we didn't talk about it and pretended that it never happened. But yesterday, I received an email from my sister, and she said a lot of things that I feel like I have to talk about. My aunt has a lot to deal with because her business is doing exceedingly well, and I don't want to disturb her or ruin her vibe right now by bringing this crap up, so I'm here instead. My sister said that she'd been counting on me and she trusted me to keep her kids safe and sound when she was away, but I'd failed her by abandoning them. She was disappointed in me and wanted me to help her find her kids so that she could take them back with her. Now, she also wanted my aunt and me to apologize to her for behaving badly with her the other day if we wanted her to be a part of our lives. She ended the email by saying that she'd be waiting for a reply and told me to make it quick because she wanted to see her kids as soon as possible. The email reeked of entitlement, and I lost my cool after I read it because it was just disgusting. She hadn't even told us where she'd been for the past 6 years, but for whatever reason, she now expected my aunt and me to act like we were family again. In the heat of the moment, I replied to the email saying that she did her kids a favor by leaving them at my place then disappearing from all of our lives because now, at least, those poor kids have a chance of having a better life that she herself would never have been able to provide for them. I told her that she would have been a terrible mother to her kids and that they're lucky that they escaped her, and then I sent that email. In the evening, my aunt came to my room and told me that my sister's boyfriend had just called her. Her business contact info is listed on her website, and that's the number he called. He told her that my sister had received and read the mail that I'd sent and was beside herself with grief. She'd had a total mental breakdown and kept repeating that she wanted her kids back and had to be sedated because that's how grief-stricken she was. I feel really guilty now and feel like I was a little excessive with what I said as well for telling my sister that her kids were lucky that she'd abandoned them because they have better parents now. Hi folks, firstly, I just want to thank everyone who responded to the original post, sending love to everyone with messed up families and psychotic sisters. I know it's not easy, but we deal with it somehow. It's been 3 days since I posted, and the response has been overwhelming. Now, I know I'm not at fault here, and whatever I said in that email was 100% true. It's not my fault that she had a breakdown because she brought that onto herself by abandoning her kids with no explanation. She never even bothered to communicate that she wanted me to take care of them during the time that she'd be gone. She'd lied to me and told me that she'd be back to take them at the end of the day, so I'd signed up to babysit them for a couple of hours, not for the next 6 years of my life. As much as I love my nephews, babies are quite a handful, and I couldn't have them around while also working toward my future. I didn't agree to that, so it was just crazy for my sister to even expect that her kids would still be living with me after 6 years. Now, a couple of things about her email that I just have to address and get off my chest. I didn't abandon her kids. If anything, I helped them out by leading them to better and worthier parents who actually care for them enough and take better care of them than my sister did. My sister is the one who abandoned them at my place and went off to God knows where for 6 years. Also, she still hasn't told us where exactly she'd been, and honestly, I don't care enough to ask either. But if she doesn't even owe us that, then it's kind of entitled of her to expect that we owe her anything at all, let alone help find her kids. As for an apology, she can pretty much forget about it because I don't want her to be a part of my life anymore. She hasn't been a part of my life for years, and I'll be just fine if she continues to not be a part of my life. It's been 3 days, and we haven't heard from her or her boyfriend again, and I'm okay with that. People can call me heartless, but I don't care about what happened to her after the breakdown. My aunt and I faced several difficulties after she left and were worried sick for many a day, but she didn't bother to check on us either. So, why should I extend the same courtesy to her? My sister can play the victim all she wants, but I know for a fact that in this situation, she's far from the victim. She's the one who created this mess, and she now has to deal with the aftermath of it herself. I can't even imagine how entitled and delusional a person has to be to act out and throw a tantrum after abandoning her own kids and then finding out that they've been adopted by a better family. At least we've warned Adam and Mara since they deserve to know. I don't know what exactly they're going to do to deal with this, but I trust them and know that they love the kids with all their heart and even more. They won't let them come in harm's way, and by harm, I mean my sister. Adam was concerned when I told him and pleaded with me not to let her know who her kids had been adopted by, but I reassured him that he had nothing to worry about because she might be their biological mother, but they were the kids' actual parents, and nothing could take that away from them, not even my sister. That seemed to pacify them a bit, and I actually regretted not letting them know earlier, but I just didn't want them to panic unnecessarily. Okay, so my sister decided to get in touch with me again today. It's the weekend, so my aunt and I were both at home, and she showed up at our house about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. We didn't even want to open the door to her because this was getting increasingly ridiculous with every week that passed. We told her to leave through the intercom, but she told us that she wasn't leaving until we informed her where her kids were right now. Obviously, we cannot give out that information without prior permission to anyone at all, especially not to her. So, We told her that we didn't know and that if she didn't leave, then we'd call the police and make her leave forcefully. Then, she began to plead with us. She started saying stuff like she only wanted to see them one time and she didn't even care if she had to see them from a distance, but she just had to get one look at them. There was a lot of pain in her voice, and I could see through the cameras that she was literally on her knees. It broke my heart because no matter what happened, I'm still a human being, and I did feel sorry for her. I felt awful, but I tried to steel myself by reminding myself of what she'd done in the past and thought of the kids before telling her for the last time that she needed to leave or I really would call the police and report her for trespassing. But she continued to cry right on the doorstep. I was left with no other option and was forced to call the police, who arrived 15 minutes later and took her away. But even then, she put up a fight and had to be taken away kicking and screaming. My aunt had just sat through the whole thing silently with her head in her hands, and I can't even blame her because this is just heartbreaking. Not because my sister can never get her kids back, but because my aunt literally raised us both, and now she has to watch one of the kids she raised completely fall apart right in front of her eyes, and she couldn't even do anything to fix things. She just had to watch it all happen and let it go. It can't have been easy for her to watch my sister in that state, and neither has it been easy for me. It's just really disturbing because I know she's suffering a lot right now, but she has nobody else to blame for this situation except herself. I don't know why exactly she disappeared, but no matter what the reason was, I highly doubt it makes what she did any more forgivable. I just want her to go back to wherever she was, not out of hatred, but simply because I don't have the emotional strength to watch my sister break down over and over again and cause someone else this amount of pain. I just can't do this again and again. I might even have to start looking at lawyers to get a restraining order against her. I don't know how effective that would be or even if I qualify for it because this is technically not a dangerous situation that we're in, but we never know. Things can go south really quickly, more so with my sister, especially since she's clearly very emotionally volatile right now. I just don't know what to do or what to think, and I'm absolutely numb right now. Nothing feels the same anymore after my sister's return, and I highly doubt I can go back to living my usual life again. In a way, it's ironic that she first disrupted all our lives by disappearing, and she's currently doing the same thing with her reappearance. It puts into perspective how selfish she actually is and how she can never be bothered to think about literally anyone except herself. I hope she and her boyfriend have been able to make something of themselves in the last 6 years because I just want them to go away now. I don't even care where she'd been or where she went, I just want her gone and for good because nothing is going to come out of her return. My sister just sent me another email 5 hours ago, and I came back home immediately after reading it and told my aunt to do the same after forwarding it to her. So, 6 years ago, a month or so before she disappeared, her boyfriend's uncle offered him a job for free at his hotel in Miami, but he made it very clear that he couldn't bring his kids along. My sister was still welcome if she could make herself useful in some way, so she went with him, and the two of them started working there for a much higher salary than what they made here. She didn't tell us anything about it because she believed that if my aunt found out about what she was earning, then she might ask her to repay all the money that my aunt had helped her out with. And out of fear and greed, she kept her mouth shut about where she'd gone. Over time, they'd worked hard and been promoted, and they'd finally saved enough to start a business of their own in Miami, which is what they were about to do. But first, they decided to take a trip back here so that they could finally take their kids back with them. They hadn't had the foresight to think that we might have actually given their kids up for adoption because my sister was sure that my aunt and I loved them too much to let them go anywhere else. So, she'd been counting on us to look after them in her absence and raise them well so she could take over whenever she'd be able to, which happens to be now. But there was just one hitch in her brilliant plan, and that was that she hadn't even told us anything about this and had disappeared without a word. She'd probably forgotten that my aunt and I were real human beings with minds of our own and not just robots who would follow whatever she'd programmed us to without questioning it at all. So now, she was begging us through her email to at least let her see her kids before she went back and keep in touch with the adopted parents so she could have some degree of contact with her kids. I don't fully understand what the intention of this email was, probably to make us realize that she'd been working through these years and that would suddenly make us have a change of heart or something. But if that really was the intended impact of her story, then my sister has failed miserably. She didn't talk to us for 6 whole years because she was too afraid that my aunt would ask her to pay her back, which is just so insane. First of all, my aunt is the last person to ask us for money, and even if she had, my sister should have had the gratitude to do it without question because she owed it to our aunt. Also, on top of that, I don't think any parent who's ready to abandon their kids for 6 years without even looking back to check on them for the sake of a couple of extra bucks deserves any sympathy, least of all not someone as materialistic and shallow as my sister. Whatever she's done was unforgivable, and her story just made it worse. But at least now, we don't have to feel sorry for her anymore. She's just a despicable excuse of a human being, And my aunt and I decided to block her without even a response because that's just what she deserves. We've also told Adam and Mara about the email, and if they're willing to opt for legal action against her to prevent her from harassing us any further, then we'll definitely be joining them. My aunt and I are disappointed that she turned out this way, but we're not surprised in the slightest. We're surprised that she and her boyfriend were able to make something of themselves, but that's about it. If they try anything funny with us after this, then they'll be looking at a restraining order, but I don't suppose she'll risk that since she has her new business to look forward to now. I wish she would just go back and never return. I don't want to see her ever again.